an honor to talk to the great Lee Strobel, author of many books, including The Case for Christmas. Mr. Strobel, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Let's, as two former atheists, I got some questions for you,
Sure.
Mr. Strobel.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to come at you from I've been a Christian for maybe 14 years. So I'm going to come at you from 15 years ago,
Okay.
Mike Slater. How do we know that these silly stories in the gospel are true about the birth of Jesus?
Yeah, we've got two detailed accounts about the birth of Jesus. One from Luke, who, by the way, does not start his gospel by saying, hey, here's some stories about something happened a long time ago in a distant land. No, he says, I carefully investigated everything so I could write an orderly account about the certainty of what took place. So he's claiming this is historical accuracy. He's sort of first century investigative reporter. He writes the account of Jesus' birth from Mary's perspective, I believe because he interviewed Mary, or he interviewed Susanna and one of her friends, Joanna, who were both friends with Mary, and he mentions them in his gospel. And then we have Matthew. Matthew was a disciple. He was a former tax collector, a disciple of Jesus. He later becomes a leader in the church in Jerusalem. And by the way, the other key leader of that church is James, the half-brother of Jesus. And so James undoubtedly told him about the perspective from the males of the family about what took place during the birth of Jesus. So we have these two early accounts that are complementary. They're not identical, which is good because it indicates these are independent sources. And then we have Mark, who wrote the first gospel, according to what Peter recalled. Peter was on the inner circle of Jesus. And people say, well, why doesn't he talk about the birth in detail? Well, not every gospel covers every aspect of Jesus' life. Mark begins a little later in the life of Jesus, but here's something interesting. In Mark chapter 6, verse 3, he refers to Jesus as Mary's son. You didn't do that in first century Jewish culture. It's always the father's son. It would have been Joseph's son, even if Joseph were deceased at that time. You would always refer to him as Joseph's son. But this is kind of a nod to the fact that, yeah, I know that Joseph wasn't his biological father. And then we have John, who wrote the last gospel. He doesn't mention the birth in detail, but he has this great theological grand entrance into his gospel about the incarnation. And he mentored a guy named Ignatius, who wrote a letter that says Jesus really and truly was born of a virgin. Where did he get that idea? I think it's from John.
Amazing. Before we go on, I got a lot more questions. Again, your book, The Case for Christmas. Why does this matter? Well, and maybe you can give everyone, if they don't know your story, like how you got to this point. But who cares? Why do we need to go back and prove all these things? Why does that matter to you?
Yeah, sure. I was a skeptic like you. I was an atheist, trained in journalism and law. And, I love the Christmas season back then because you get drunk, or at least I did. A lot of drinking, a lot of parties, a lot of gift giving. People are friendly. I like Christmas as an atheist. But, when you realize, wait a minute, this is not fairy tales, make believe, wishful thinking, mythology. This is based on historical reality. Well, now the best stories are the true stories. And if it's a true story that Jesus is the unique Son of God who proved it ultimately by returning from the dead, then my goodness, this becomes not just a great story, but an awe-inspiring story.
Why do you trust those two guys who wrote it? And I hear a lot of people say thousands of years or hundreds of years after Jesus actually lived. Why do you trust those guys?
Yeah, not true. I mean, Matthew was an eyewitness. He was a disciple of Jesus. So he's writing from an eyewitness perspective, very close to the birth of Jesus and then and to his life. And then we say Luke was a companion of Paul, who was an eyewitness to the resurrected Christ. And as I say, he was a first century investigative reporter. He checked things out. He makes the claim that he investigated this stuff. And I think we need to take that seriously, given the detail with which he wrote. He wrote a quarter of the entire New Testament. And several areas, people thought that Luke was incorrect in some of his historical observations until further archaeology proved, wait a minute, Luke was telling the truth. So he has a track record of being very, very accurate. And this is all within the first generation of of people. So this isn't stuff 1,000 years later. This is stuff within the first generation.
Has anything ever been proven wrong? Has archaeology or any other history proven this stuff wrong?
No, it hasn't. There's been no archaeological discovery that's controverted any New Testament reference. In Luke's case, as I say, he's been shown to be right a million times, especially concerning the census that brought Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem. People thought Luke had the chronology wrong because of his reference to Quirinius, who was the governor at the time of the census. And people said, oh, no, you've got that mixed up. Well, no, later historical investigation shows he was telling the truth. He was right. He was correct all along. And a Swiss scholar recently documented that in a major doctoral dissertation.
Love that. All right, let's talk about some even more the crazy things.
Yeah.
Virgin birth. How is that possible, Lee?
Yeah, well, great question, because in order for Mary to give birth to a male child, she would have to have the Y chromosome in her ovum. Female children have two X's, males have an X and a Y. She would have lacked the Y. So how did this male child get birth? And one of the great defenders of the Christian faith, Dr. William Lane Craig, with 2 earned doctorates, used to doubt the virgin birth because of that fact. And then he reasoned, wait a minute, we've got excellent evidence from cosmology, from physics, from biochemistry, that there is a creator behind the universe. And if that's true, then the creation of a Y chromosome in Mary is child's play. So I think we can believe that if God created the cosmos, and I think we've got good evidence historically and scientifically that he did, then there's no problem to create a Y chromosome.
That's right. I've always had a tough time with the prophecies. And this atheist me speaking, it's like, okay, well, prophecy that he comes in on a donkey. Well, listen, this guy just, if he wanted to trick people, he was like, I'm going to make sure I come in on a donkey.
Right.
Stuff like that, right? So what prophecy to you stands out?
Yeah.
Like, here's something that was written a long time ago that he couldn't have faked.
Yes. For instance, Micah 5, verse 2, written 500 years before Jesus was born, said that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus was born, in Isaiah 7:14, predicted that the Messiah would be born of a virgin. We've got so many of these ancient prophecies, and you're right, some of them Jesus could have maneuvered his life to fulfill intentionally, but a lot of them he couldn't, like where he was born, his manner of birth, his ancestry, and so forth. And so a mathematician with a PhD, he was a professor at a college in California, Dr. Peter Stoner, realized that many of these prophecies could be mathematically quantified. Like how many people were born in Bethlehem? We can quantify that. And so he just ran the numbers. And what he determined is the mathematical probability of anyone in history fulfilling just 48 of these ancient prophecies would be one chance in a trillion. Yep. I mean, this is mathematically impossible that anybody could fulfill these prophecies by chance.
That's right. Okay, let me ask you a question. I wonder if I'm the first one to ever ask you this. I'm so arrogant to think I'm the first one that ever asked this question. I was just reading yesterday with the kids. Luke, I guess it maybe would have been, I forget where we were. 1, 2, 3, 2 maybe. And about the Magi, right? We're following the star. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you follow a star? I don't even know what that means. Like I'm putting myself in these guys' shoes. It's like, how do you follow it? It's way up there. Yeah. And then they had to think during this process.
Yeah.
So they're following it. So they notice it. They follow it. Plus, like the whole time they're doing this, they had to be like, "This is pretty stupid. Like, what are we really doing?" And like, so tell me about these guys.
Yes, the Magi were from. We don't have a lot of information on them, frankly. So some of this is based on historical context that we can lay. But the Magi were from the Far East. They were astrologers, which, by the way, the kind of thing they were into, mediums and astrology, was forbidden by the Old Testament. So these people were not followers of the Messiah and so forth. But they studied the stars. And one professor of astrophysics, who was a good friend of mine, who was an atheist who became a Christian studying astrophysics, her theory is that the star, and by the way, the word in Greek there for star is expandable enough to mean any celestial body. It could have been a comet, could have been a planet, could have been conjunction of planets, could have been a star. So her theory is that this was a nova. A nova burns brightly for a while, a star, and then it grows dimmer, and then brightly for a while, and then grows dimmer. The average person, you and I, would not notice this, but these astrologers who studied the stars would have noticed it, and its position in the heavens astrologically would have told them where this was going to take place. And so they're gaining guidance from this star based on where it is and what it represents. But I think the big theological significance of the Magi is that the Messiah was not just coming for the Jewish people, as the Jewish people thought at the time. Yes, he was coming for them, but he's coming for everybody, that they, even these Gentile pagans who came to worship Jesus, this shows that Jesus is coming for the entire planet, for all humanity, not just for the Jewish nation. This expanded the meaning of the Christ.
Yeah. I can tell there's I don't know if this is just your personality or you just love talking about this. Is there like does this bring you like joy and excitement? Like where does it come from in your voice to like tell these stories?
I love it. I love when you find out things that you always wondered about, like how did we land on December the 25th? The Bible doesn't tell us. Well, they had a belief that Jesus would have been conceived on the same date of the calendar that he was killed. And so in the year 200, Tertullian, an early Christian leader, decided to look and determine, well, when did he die? And he determined that based on the Roman calendar, he died on March the 25th. And if he died on March the 25th, he would have been conceived on March the 25th. Fast forward 9 months, and he got December the 25th.
I never heard that my whole life.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Come on.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
And by the way,
I can see why you're so excited.
That's from a Yale divinity dean. So I know you have a Yale background, so you got to have some respect there for that theory.
And so do you. All right. I don't know where to end this because I just want to talk to you forever. Maybe we can end on Santa.
Yeah.
What your recommendation is for this other thing, this other person that's not in the Bible. We just did a segment on Nicholas, like the real guy Nicholas.
Yes.
But what's your suggestion for Santa?
Well, what do you do with kids who fall in love with Santa Claus? And I don't like to burst their bubble at a young age. I like to say, hey, you know what? Santa Claus is a fanciful idea, but let's talk about the real Saint Nicholas. That's kind of what resulted in this idea of Santa Claus. And if you already talked about him on your program, that's great because he was a wonderful Christian leader, very generous individual who was tortured for his faith. He was imprisoned for his faith. He stood up for truth at the Council of Nicaea against the heretic Arius. The idea that he slapped Arius is probably not accurate historically, but he stood up for truth. He was a man of truth, a man of generosity, and a man of love. So let's focus on St. Nicholas and how he kind of got reduced to this Santa Claus, who, by the way, our current image of Santa Claus, you know what it comes from? The 1930s when Coca-Cola had a big print campaign advertisement. That's where this current image of Santa Claus that we have gets all pulled together for the first time. And that's why we picture him today the way that we picture him.
What a shame. I got one more question. I got about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Do you lament the fact that Christmas has turned into a holiday as opposed to a holy day? And what's your suggestion on how we can turn it back?
I don't lament it because I think people are more spiritually sensitive because of the holiday. I think they tend to open up spiritually, and that gives us the opportunity to talk about the holy day.
Great. Lee Strobel, The Case for Christmas. By that, everything else that Lee has to offer. Lee, super grateful for you. Thank you for your time today. I hope we can talk again.
Thank you, sir. Great chatting with you.
Really good. I hope we can all get Lee's infectious spirit too. Love that. Lee's like, let me tell you the story. Love that so much. And I love that last message too. Let's take this opportunity of the holiday, and help people turn it into a holy day. Thanks so much for being here on The First TV. Spread the word.